So Muhammad al-Fatih now fulfills the prophecy of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Does he stop there? He doesn't stop there. Most of us, if we had done this, we would have thought, okay, we've done enough now. The Prophet ﷺ said, you're the best of Amir. Jannah guaranteed. Fulfill the prophecy of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. Not Muhammad al-Fatih. 1453, he took Constantinople. 1459, he took Serbia. 1460, he took Moria. 1461, he took the Black Sea. 1463, Bosnia. 1478, Kerman. 1478, Albania. 1463, he took Wallachia. You know where Wallachia is? Where Dracula comes from. Muhammad al-Fatih came to one place where he found thousands and thousands of Muslims impaled by Dracula. Just in one place, he killed 23,884 Bulgarians and Turks. They say that Muhammad al-Fatih was the real manifestation of the dream of Usman. The Muslim world has had millions of conquerors. But when you say Al-Fatih, the conqueror, there was only one.
So the Ottoman Empire is spreading, they're expanding. Now in the year 1462, they've invaded Wallachia. Wallachia is southern Romania and also Moldavia, which is one of the countries next to Romania. Now here is where we find a man whose name was Dracul. Dracul was the father of Dracula. Now Dracul itself in Romanian, it means the dragon. Now his first name was Vlad, Vlad II. So they called him Vlad Dracul, Vlad the dragon. Now he had 4 children. One of them, the third of his children was also named Vlad. And so we call him Vlad III. And he eventually became known as the son of Dracul, or as you say in Romanian, Draculea. Draculea is where we get the name Dracula. Now it's interesting to note that in modern Romanian, Dracul, it doesn't mean dragon anymore. It actually means shaitan. Now his 4th son, his name was Radu. He was called Radu the Handsome. So what happened was his father, so the father of Dracula, Dracul himself, Vlad II, he joined a group of European leaders and kings and noblemen, and they actually called themselves the Order of the Dragon. They were founded in Hungary. This group, the Order of the Dragon, they were actually based upon the Crusaders. So what happened was they, like the Knight Templar and all of these, they decided to make a group based upon them in Eastern Europe, with the aim of, as they said, defending Christianity, defending the cross and fighting the Muslims. It was in fashion, to make these secret societies, the Knight Templars, the Freemasons, the Order of the Dragon, as you had. Now, when Dracula was 5 years old, he was made a member of this group. They want him from a very young age to hate the Ottomans. So he was put into this Order of the Dragon. Now, going forward a little bit to 1436, Vlad II, Shaitan, Dracul, he ascended to the throne of Wallachia. So he became the king of Wallachia, which is southern Rome. Now, he stayed in power until 1442. In 1442, he was actually overthrown. So some other people in another part of Romania, assisted by the Hungarians, they actually overthrew him. So what Vlad actually did is he appealed to the Ottomans. We remember, this is a man who was sworn to fight the Ottomans and the Muslims. To fight against other Christians, he put aside his grudge against the Muslims. He forgot Order of the Dragon, and he said to the Ottomans, help me to get back the throne, and I'll pay you the jizya. Help me fight my enemies, and I'll pay you the jizya. I'll pay you a tribute. So the Ottomans, of course, they said, this sounds good. So they said, no problem, we'll help you. So what happened was, they actually were able to fight to get him back into power, and along with paying the jizya, he had to send his 2 youngest sons to the Ottoman Empire. So he sent Dracula, Vlad III, and Radu. So he actually sent them to the Ottoman Empire. So Dracula and his brother Radu, they were actually sent to go and live with the Ottomans. So they went there, and they were living in the Ottoman Empire. They were educated, and they actually learned Turkish. They studied Persian. They studied the Quran. They studied horse riding, military warfare. Dracula learned Quran. He spoke perfect Turkish and Persian, and even Arabic to some degrees. Now what happened was Radu was very good. Radu, he studied the Quran very well. He got along with everyone. Vlad, however, Dracula, he would always argue with his trainers. He'd always be arguing. So they'd constantly, be locking him away. They'd get him back to his studies. He'd abuse them, so they'd whip him. So Radu was like the ideal student. He got along with the Muslims very well. Radu actually embraced Islam. So the brother of Dracula is now a Muslim. Now Radu he was honored. The Sultan actually called him Radu Bey. Bey was a title of privilege within the Ottoman Empire. And he was actually he was placed in charge of a garrison of the Ottoman army. Vlad, however, was different. Vlad was very shrewd. They could tell this man, he's very shrewd, he's a good politician. He argues a lot. Even though he's arguing with them, they can see that he's got something inside him and he has a strong link to his people. So what had happened was, Vlad, he built up a hatred towards the Ottomans, especially towards the prince, Mehmed, who later became Muhammad al-Fatih. He hated him from a very young age, subhanAllah. Around the same age. They were around the same age. So you see, Vlad, he hated the Ottomans in general. He hated his father for sending him there. He hated the Hungarians for attacking his father. Now, in the year 1447, there's a Hungarian. His name was John Hunyadi. Now, John Hunyadi actually rebelled against the father of Dracula, against Vlad II, and he killed him. So what had happened was the Ottomans realized there's now a vacuum of power. Dracula's father has been killed. So rather than letting the Hungarians quickly take the throne, they invaded Wallachia and they had to put someone in charge to rule in the place of his father. So they decided to put Dracula. So what had happened was the Ottomans, they supported Vlad to go to war with the Hungarians. In the end, the Hungarians had too much power. This is closer to their power base. The Ottomans couldn't, give that much support to them. So Dracula, he was forced to flee. So he was taken out of power. Now, once he fled, now he's not under the hold of the Ottomans anymore. Now he's by himself. He's on his own. He can do exactly what he wants. Now, what had happened was the Hungarians actually found out about Dracula's history. They found out that he really hated the Ottomans. This was John Hunyadi. He heard that, Dracula was very, very much against, especially Sultan Mehmed, Muhammad al-Fatih. Because at that time, Muhammad had just become the new Sultan. So John Hunyadi, he thought about it. He thought, Vladislav, he might be a nice ruler, but he doesn't have a hatred for the Ottomans. Because John Hunyadi, he really hated the Muslims. He was a big enemy of the Ottoman Empire. So he thought about it and he said, I'd prefer to put Vlad, Dracula, in power. John Hunyadi said, I can use him. So he actually said to Vladislav, your time's up. And he said to Dracula, you're welcome to take the throne of Wallachia. So this is the time, year 1453. 1453, a very, very beautiful year in Islamic history. The conquest of Constantinople. The center of Christianity. This impregnable fortress that we talked about. And we're going to look at in a future episode, inshallah. It's now fallen to the Muslims. So now we see the Ottomans, they've taken, consolidated, Constantinople, most of this area, and now they're marching upon the Balkans. So they're taking Albania, they're attacking Belgrade, and so John Hunyadi, the Hungarian, he actually sends some forces to go fight them. So Vlad, he took some of his own forces, and what he did is he actually, he really consolidated his power then as well. He killed Vladislav, just in case Vladislav wanted to get back power. So now he's pretty much controlling most of Wallachia. Now at this point, the Ottomans have pushed through Belgrade, all of these things, and now they're marching on Wallachia. So they're at Dracula's front yard basically. So he's ready. So at this time, the Muslims, as we see, this is part of, from the Sunnah, they didn't just march upon Wallachia. When they'd go to a land, first they'd send envoys. They'd send messengers to go speak to the ruler to say, you've got the choice, accept Islam, pay the jizya, or we'll fight you. So they sent envoys into the court of Dracula. Now remember, Dracula hates the Ottomans. So when they came in, he said to them, take your hats off. Then they're not wearing hats, they're wearing a turban, imama. So take your hat off. And he knows they're not going to take their turban off for him. So they refused. They said, no, we don't take this off. So he said, okay. And he said, what do you have to say to me? They said, embrace Islam or pay the jizya. He said, neither. And he said, because you disrespected me for not taking your hat off, I'm going to nail your turbans to your heads. So he got his people with big metal nails, nailed them into their heads. In other words, he's killed them. And this is against all diplomatic protocol. Killing messengers, killing envoys is one of the worst things that you can do. So what happened was Muhammad al-Fatih, rahimahullah, he sent one of his generals, Hamza Pasha, and he sent him with 10,000 horsemen. So 10,000 horsemen is a big army. So this is the initial invasion upon the land of Dracula. So 10,000 horsemen are coming through. However, the Wallachians had received news of this. They had some inside information. They knew these men were coming. So what they did is they waited. They waited until they came to a very narrow area. You know, like you're going through mountains. When you got a wide area, it's easy to escape. You get to a narrow pass, you know, you're stuck. So what happened was they were ambushed as they were going through this narrow area. So they were caught, the Wallachians killed 10,000 of them. There were no prisoners. Now, from here is where we're going to see the true nature of Dracula.
The real Dracula was known as the Impaler. You know what impaling is? When they put you on the stake, and the stake, they put up your rear end and it comes out of your mouth, and they hang you up like this.
This is where he earned his name. His name, as he's known in Romanian today, is Vlad Țepeș. Because, you know, you kill the people and you bury them, no one can see them. I want you to imagine, you go looking for your army, you say, where are our 10,000 men? You go looking for them, and all of a sudden you see 10,000 men impaled upon these poles. Vlad the Impaler, as we know him, Dracula. Now, Dracula, he's on the forefront. He's just killed 10,000 men. He's on a high. You know, after doing this, you almost think you're invincible to a degree. So he marched through to meet the Muslims. Now, the Muslims were camped, and Muhammad al-Fatih, as we know, he wasn't like a king who would sit back. Very, very brave. And we know Muhammad al-Fatih, you know, his army, you know, he'd have scholars with him. You know, he'd have reciters of the Quran. He was always surrounded by, you know, very pious people. He was very, very pious. He grew up, you know, every Fajr, you know, him and his father, the Sultan, they'd always pray together. This is a man who studied the Quran from a young age. He was a very amazing man. So he would be there leading the Muslim army, leading the Ottoman army. And what Dracula did is like stealth guerrilla warfare. What he would do, because remember he spoke Turkish, he spoke Persian, he lived in the Ottoman Empire. So he could pass himself off as an Ottoman. What he would do is he'd dress himself up as an Ottoman soldier. And Dracula himself, he would sneak into the Muslim army. Because a lot of them, they won't know who Dracula is. This is a courageous man. I mean, you've got to hand it to him. This is a courageous thing to do. He'd sneak into the Muslim tents. He'd look for the leaders. He'd come in, he'd kill them, and then he'd leave. No one really knew how he looked. And what he'd do is when he's in the camp, he'd actually, you know, take a look and he'd get information from the people. He'd say, when are we moving? When is this happening? So he'd try and get all these information. And then he would use this against the Ottomans. So he'd say, okay, we know that they're going to march later. What we're going to do is we'll actually stop them here. So he had something called the night attack. The night attack is where he knew that the Muslims were going to be in their base for a short while. So they attacked the Muslims. What they actually did is what's called the night attack. They actually killed 23,000 Muslims. He takes them to the capital, and the road that leads to the capital, he starts putting all of the impaled people. So the whole road, you're traveling on this road, you've got 23,000 people impaled on the road to the capital. It was said that when the Ottoman army started to march on the capital, which he knew they would, Muhammad al-Fatih, rahimahullah, himself, he saw this, and he realized, this man we're dealing with is not a normal man. He was disgusted. He saw this, and it really affected him. Obviously, he's devastated by this. What does he do? He sends 90,000 troops, a very large army, to march onto the capital of Târgoviște. 90,000 of them have been sent to attack the capital of Wallachia, Târgoviște. Now, Dracula at this time, he had 40,000 men. So 40,000 against 90,000, he knows that he's not going to last. So what he does is he actually takes his army outside of the city. So the Ottomans come in, and this is where they see the bodies lining all the way, and so they've taken the city. Now, what Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih rahimahullah did, he actually appointed a special general to finish off Dracula. He didn't want to put just any general. This is Islam against KUFR. It's the truth against batil, the truth against falsehood. So Radu, he's a Muslim. He has no qualm about this. He says, I'll take my brother down. So he actually, he started to attack Dracula in his own castle. He had a castle on the outskirts where he used to live. He attacked the castle. So Dracula, he's been driven out of there. So Dracula, he's on the run at this point. The Ottomans are coming for him. He knows that he's almost finished. By this time, the Pope has stopped paying him. The Pope can't afford to look after his forces anymore. So he comes to the Hungarians and says, please, cash me up, basically. Now the Hungarians, they refused. They said, you've become a disgrace. You can't even look after yourself. So they actually imprisoned him. So they took him as a prisoner. It's not clear how long he was taken as a prisoner for. Some say for 2 years, some say 6 years. But he was kept as a prisoner by the Hungarians. Now eventually the Hungarians, they let him go. Now once he left, he actually found out that his brother, Radu Bey, rahimahullah, he'd actually passed away at this time. May Allah have mercy upon his soul. So he's found out his brother's dead. He's the only one of his brothers remaining. The other two had already been killed. So what he did is he gathered an army. He gathered an army of Wallachians, people from Romania, and he said, we're going to, march upon our country, and it's pretty much going to be our last stand. It's basically do or die. Either we take the country and we try to defend it, or we're going to die trying, and basically that's the end. Now, it didn't last long. It lasted a few months. They tried to attack the Muslims for a few months, but in the end, it was too much. The Ottomans, they sent some ghazis, some of the most brave warriors, and they attacked Dracula and his army. Now, in January 1477, one of the Ottoman armies of the ghazis, they attacked the army of Dracula, and they killed him in the battle. The Ottomans, they don't just kill him. When you've got an enemy like this, who's done so many things, now he was beheaded at that point, so they couldn't impale his body. So what they did is the Hungarians took his body, the Muslims took his head. They put his head on one of the biggest sticks you've ever seen, and put it at the walls of Constantinople for every Muslim to see. So Vlad the Impaler himself was impaled.
Muhammad al-Fatih rahimahullah was the real killer of Dracula. The history of Dracula. Muhammad al-Fatih killed Dracula. The momentum Muhammad al-Fatih started in Europe. It took Europe 200 years to stop the momentum that Muhammad al-Fatih started in Europe. Rahmatullah alayhi. Whenever you say al-Fatih, you refer to Muhammad al-Fatih, the conqueror.